All right, welcome to Huddle, everyone. Thanks so much for showing up. We got a nice long weekend ahead of us. Hope everyone's got some fun plans. Do not start any fires, please. Feels like it needs to be said. Maybe it doesn't. I don't know. But I do live in one of those cities that decided that they were going to permit fireworks, so I'm a tiny bit worried, maybe slightly more elevated than previous years, but whatever. No one asked my opinion. And we've got we're kind of going to continue on with some of the stuff we did last time. We're going to talk about a few documents. If we do have time at the end, or we could start with it if anybody has strong feelings about it. But I do want to finish with some REMI stuff. The more I'm seeing what REMI is putting out, the more I think it's a pretty critical tool. And I really haven't, I'll introduce tools to everyone who wants to learn about them in sales meetings and whatnot. But I do get the feeling, and the more I dive into REMI, the more I feel like it's an amazing piece of technology that I think if you learn it, it's going to improve your real estate life. And there's not too many pieces of real estate technology that I would say that about. But it troubles me not at all to say that REMI is one of those things that can really actually change your real estate life. So without further ado, let's jump in and talk about some forms. Let's do this. All right, in front of you, I do want to talk about option to keep the house on the market, buyer has a home to sell, that type of stuff today. Primarily because this is one of those subjects that I feel like we always need to cover, and we need to cover it frequently to keep everybody really sharp on. And the biggest reason is because I feel like there's a lot of moving parts here, and I feel like it can easily, we can easily get lost with this. But before we start, let's talk about the sale of buyer's property 2.2 in the REPC and why it's there. Buyer's ability to purchase the property, to obtain the loan referenced in section 2.1 above, and or any portion of cash referenced in section 2.1. It is or is not conditioned upon the sale of real estate owned by the buyer. If checked in the affirmative, the terms of this attached subject to sale of buyer's property addendum apply. So in the past, before they updated and gave us a 2.2 paragraph to this purchase contract, this was not a requirement. And it was up to the listing agent to pry enough to come to some conclusion that yes, this buyer actually had to sell their house in order to qualify to buy this property. I think it's a great update to the REPC because people were paying very fast and loose with the term "we are qualified to purchase this real estate." And remember, this applies to people who aren't getting loans because let's say you are someone who owns a house free and clear, and you intend to use the proceeds of that sale in order to purchase the subject property. You need a home to sell to qualify. You do not have any other options. Now, got to pose a few questions to the audience. Let's say they do have the cash. Let's say they demonstrate the ability to purchase the property with cash, from a mutual fund account or something like that, right? Or some savings account. They can demonstrate their ability to do it. Is it relevant that their intention is to get a loan? Is that relevant to your negotiation? And is it important information that you should have and that they should disclose? Actually, let me rephrase. Should the buyer disclose, even though they have the cash, that they intend to get a loan? Is that something that two questions, if they have to disclose it, or they ethically should disclose it? What say you, Berkies? What say you in this scenario? Because I think it cuts to the heart of the matter here. Again, not all at once. Too many comments coming in. I can't read them all at the same time. Bottom line is, my perspective is that yes, this is information that should be disclosed. Kimmy says ethically, yes. I think there's almost no front in which, you should have a buyer should do anything other than disclose how they're going to purchase this real estate. Because it really cuts to the heart of how are you going to complete this transaction? Because there are a whole bunch of scenarios in which, hey, look, I have the ability to close on this property with all this cash. I have no intention of using that cash. I have other plans for that cash, but I totally have the ability to do it, right? It means nothing that you have the ability if you have no intention of doing it, because we want to know what your intentions are to purchase this real estate. What are your intentions with my daughter, young man? That cuts to the heart of it. We don't care what your abilities are. We care what your intentions are. So remember that when we check this box. If you see this come across 2.2 is check no, this purchase is not conditioned upon it, then I think our natural instincts kick in where we go, okay, well, demonstrate that you don't need to get a loan. The follow-up question should be, okay, so you're going to use this fund to close on this real estate. Is that correct? Right? And I think the vast majority of the time the answer will be yes. But if there's a hesitation there, and the hesitation is something along the lines of, well, we might get a loan, the answer in your brain should tell you they're going to get a loan. They're going to get a loan. That's what they're going to do. There's a lot of people out there with cash that I've heard it so many times. Yeah, we could totally use our cash. We would prefer not to. We would prefer not to. No, they don't. The answer is I do not want to use this cash to close on this real estate. I want to use this cash for several things. And honestly, it's a pretty natural instinct to not use all your cash to close on one thing. So be curious. Always be curious about this situation. Moving on from that, there is some confusion out there by a few agents that when they check that they can somehow provide some random language about, or a random addendum on a blank, or random language on a blank addendum about the subject to sale situation. But remember, it states explicitly the terms of the attached subject to sale of buyer's property addendum apply. It's already saying that an exact addendum must be included in this purchase contract. So if you're the listing agent and you do not get that exact addendum, you need to hit the brakes and make them present that exact addendum. Now, have I seen situations where that exact addendum causes confusion? Yeah. But there's no choices here. As a real estate agent who needs to use appropriate forms and addendums, you got to attach it. And then if you have to work your way around it, then you work your way around it. But it's very explicit that you use this exact form. So with that being said, let's jump to the exact form. Subject to sale of buyer's property. Jump right to the first paragraph. Subject to sale condition. Buyer's obligation to purchase the property is conditioned upon the closing of the sale of buyer's property located at, and then we obviously list the address. Paragraph A, buyer's right to cancel before the due diligence or financing and appraisal deadline, whichever is later. So what that essentially says is this is the last line. Hold on, let me rephrase. My brain is not working as smoothly as it normally does. The latest date, your contingency dates there, is the date that this applies to as well. Buyer may cancel in buyer's sole discretion if the buyer has not closed on the sale of the buyer's property by providing written notice to seller no later than the due diligence deadline referenced in section 24B or the financing and appraisal deadline referenced in 24C, whichever is later, whereupon the earnest money shall be released to buyer without the further written authorization from seller. So there you have it, pretty cut and dry. B, buyer's right to cancel after due diligence deadline or financing and appraisal deadline, whichever is later. If buyer does not cancel the REPC by the due diligence deadline or the finance and appraisal deadline, whichever is later, and has not closed on the sale of the buyer's property, then buyer may cancel the REPC on or prior to the settlement deadline by providing written notice to the seller, whereupon the earnest money deposit shall be released to seller without the further written authorization from buyer. Seller agrees to accept as seller's exclusive remedy the earnest money deposit or deposit, if applicable, as liquidated damages. Excuse me. So, a few things going on there. You should notice that this addendum limits if you represent the buyer, it limits your buyer's exposure to damages, right? So the only damages that are acceptable if you have this in place is earnest money. There's nothing more the seller can do other than take the earnest money and accept that as their damages. So that's one element that's positive in this regard. Now, if you represent the seller, and we always talk about this, the earnest money should represent the amount of damages that a seller would consider appropriate, right? So that's the only way we should view earnest money, in my opinion. I'm sure somebody could give me other ways we should view earnest money, but that's the number one way that we should view earnest money, is that it's the amount of money that would satisfy us to compensate and cure our damages caused by the buyer. And this is the same here, right? So they're going to take our house off the market for an extended period of time. If they don't cancel by the finance and appraisal deadline, then we are covered. You know, there's some satisfaction of a failed sale in that we do have the amount of earnest money to cover our damages. Anybody have any questions on that thus far? Anybody have any issues that have popped up they'd like to discuss? Feel free to unmute yourself. Throw it in the chat. Whatever. Throw it in there. Moving on. Paragraph 2. Buyer's property listing requirement. This is always, I don't know why this is always a weird subject. Buyer's property is or is not currently listed on the multiple listing service for sale through a real estate brokerage. In the event buyer's property is not currently listed for sale through a real estate brokerage, buyer agrees the property will be listed on a multiple listing service within 7 days of acceptance. The name of the listing agent will be, and the name of the brokerage is. This is a kind of a big deal, and I feel like, if our seller is desperate, maybe I could see a situation in which they would agree to choose to continue down the path of a deal in which someone, yes, they have to sell their real estate in order to qualify, but we haven't actually cared enough to list our house yet. I know why buyers do this. Like, I understand why they do this. I think it's a horrible strategy. And I think everybody understands why. I don't think I need to belabor that point. But think of it if you represent the seller. Like, what should we do here? What should we do if someone presents us with, hey, I want to buy your property. Here's my buyer. They have to sell their house in order to qualify to purchase this property, and we haven't put it on the market yet. What does that say about that buyer and their motivation and their intention and their qualifications to buy this? What does that say about them? Does it make us feel good? Are we excited about this position? All right, remember that mute button is in the bottom left-hand corner. It's a little mic. It's got a red line through it right now. You could just totally unmute yourself. And we could gab about this subject. Kimmy says, ask how serious are they? That is actually a simple yet very powerful question. I think, you might phrase it as, how serious are they? As opposed to, how serious are they? I think if you apply a little, apply some of exactly what you think you should apply to that phrase, how serious are they? It's a really great question. And just leave it at that, because it's the best question. Why are you making offers on real estate that you really don't qualify for, and you haven't taken any steps other than contact a lender? Because you need to take Like, it's way more difficult to list your house and sell it than it is to get pre-approved, pre-qualified, either one, right? It's way more difficult. So how serious are they? And why? And the follow-up question is, once they answer that, well, why are they making offers now? Maybe their explanation satisfies you, right? Maybe the explanation of that situation does satisfy you and motivates you to convince your seller that this is a good idea. Maybe it does happen. But it should tell you a lot. Karen says, not necessarily serious. The process should be explained to them by their agent. Yeah, without question. I will say that I think, I don't know if as an industry we do this. I think the agents at our brokerage that I interact with every day do a pretty dang good job of saying, hey, listen, the best route to take is that you list your home, you sell your home. While it's under contract, we start looking for homes because now we have a real date that we can work around. Like, that's at a minimum. And then while we're under contract, I feel okay putting another home under contract for you to move into. If it's me personally, I know my wife would not like to hear this, but I'm like, no, we're going to sell our house. We're going to move into whoever's house. And the second we get under contract, we'll start looking for homes, but I'd prefer to be closed and done before we start negotiating on our next home, because that's the most powerful negotiating position to be in. It could be very meaningful to us. That's, to me, is the right scenario. Now, there's a whole bunch of scenarios other than that play out every single day that work out. I understand that. But that's not where we're at right now. Why is it not on the market yet? Are they offering hard earnest money? Keep marketing. Yeah, like, let's talk about, even if our sellers are desperate, okay? Let's say we've had a hard time selling this home, and a buyer's agent says, well, you've been on the market for 93 days and you haven't had an offer yet, and you're giving us a hard time? The answer is yes, we're giving you a hard time. We might only have one shot at this. And I don't know if we want our one shot to be the people who haven't even listed a home that they had to sell. Like, that's a legitimate argument. And if you don't think about that ahead of time, you're like, yeah, well, you're kind of right. We're desperate. We have a little bit of desperation in our voice because we've been on the market too long and they've already moved to a new place for a new job. But the bottom line is that should make us, still be critical of the buyers that approach us. The earnest money issue, like, we preach this all the time, I think probably in every single huddle. Earnest money can solve so many problems. So many problems. Because let's paint the scenario about this. Let's paint this scenario. Yeah, Mr. Seller, I want to buy your home. No, I haven't listed my home for sale yet. I am pre-approved. My finances look great, but I do have to sell this home, pull some equity out in order to qualify. But I really want this home. And in order to prove that, I'm going to offer non-refundable earnest money in the amount of this, even though I'm going to deposit, I'll deposit $10,000, but I'm going to make $3,000 of that non-refundable immediately in order to make you understand that I'm serious. That's a very different conversation, isn't it? Makes you feel very differently about moving forward because they are motivated in a way that they've demonstrated that they're motivated in a way that might overcome to some degree the fact that they haven't even listed their home yet. Karen says, flip the narrative. Would you accept this offer from a buyer with the same circumstances? Yeah, it's a pretty good question to put back on it. I think, as always, whenever you can, when you're negotiating in every scenario, it's always a good idea to make somebody else solve the problem for you. And in that way, Karen's done that with that narrative, which is, would you accept this? Right? I know that we've been on the market, and I've just told you that, I have a motivated seller here, but they're motivated with highly qualified buyers who are ready to close. But your buyer doesn't necessarily make them motivated. It has the opposite effect. Might be something you say. Might be, if you're feeling a little snarky that day. Yeah, so keep marketing, offering hard earnest money. Why is it not on the market yet? I think are all really like the obvious but really important questions to hear the answers to. If they like, and think about this, I can imagine several scenarios in which their answers would prompt you to go, I don't think you should accept this at all. Because if it's not on the market yet, think of every time you get a listing. How many times do you walk up on a Monday on your first appointment, and let's say you're really good at your listing appointment and you got a listing agreement signed when you walk out the door on the Monday? How many people have their house ready to go in 24 hours? You're like, I'm ready to go. The house is ready to be listed and shown. Not very often. That's not usually the flow of things. It can happen, right? There's properties out there that are just ready to show all the time because of so many reasons, but the seller is like had the foresight to prepare and depersonalize and declutter and do all that stuff. It can take weeks to get a home ready for some people. And so this is all really important information to know. And then let's talk about, let's switch subjects. Let's talk about something. Did anybody hear that just came across? That weird notification sound by a computer? I'm just in my ears. Anyway, let's talk about too, should we scrutinize the house that is being put up on the market that is in connection with our sale? We absolutely should. And it adds like another layer of complexity to our jobs as a listing agent. Okay, so you have a house to sell. Where is this house? They got to put the address on it, right? Okay, what is your intended purchase price? Do you have a marketing plan put together? Listing agent, future listing agent, what is your days on market, your median days on market for this house in this neighborhood? Right? What's the demand like? If they can answer all those questions with confidence, oh yeah, I've already done the research. Median days on market is 21 days. We're going to price it more aggressively than that. As you can see here, here's some comps that we have in our neighborhood, and we're going to price it slightly below those to garner more interest. And it's a really good favorable time for us because we don't have any competition. Those are really good answers that maybe would prompt us to move forward. The answers that don't prompt us to move forward is, no, we're not quite ready to show it yet. Oh, we haven't done pricing yet. We think we're going to be between this and that. Our pricing range is between this and that. The seller hasn't decided on a price yet, or my client hasn't decided on a price yet. Those aren't good answers. Like, those are people that shouldn't be making offers on property. Okay. And I know, like, we can put a lot, we can judge other agents for making those offers, but remember, to a very large degree, our clients are kind of pulling us around on a leash and telling us what they want us to do. All right. And because we want to provide good customer service, we feel obligated to do those things. And, you know, sometimes we get ourselves in situations that we don't want to be in, but we do for our clients. But that doesn't relieve you, listing agent, of the obligation to highly scrutinize this situation. So anybody have any questions or comments on this before we move on to another document? Karen says, ultimately, your seller will most likely not want to take the property off the market by going under contract in this scenario to live on hopium that this will all somehow smoothly work out. Yeah, that does happen. I will say that this scenario is fairly common, that people do enter into these transactions. And remember, it's not our jobs to tell our sellers what to do. It's our job to present all the information and make recommendations of the best path forward. And then remind them that this is their decision, though, because they have to live with the consequences, not us. Right? All the information, we tell them based on our experience what we consider to be a good scenario, and then remind them, I don't live with these consequences, you do. So this is your decision, client. All right. I think we covered that. I think that horse is, I would say it. All right. Moving on. Now, let's say that we do accept this. I think all of our instincts are to say, yeah, seller, listen, one of our options is to accept this. And then we use the time clause addendum, which, you know what, I wish we would call it the option to keep the property on the market. Or we should relabel this in our files to just the time clause addendum, because when you search up time clause addendum, it never pops up. You got to remember it's the option to keep it's just like, it just needs to be time clause addendum. That's what everybody calls it. But of course, this is what we respond with. And this is, remember, you do not need anybody's permission to accept backup offers. Okay? And you don't need anybody's permission to continue to offer this property in backup status. You don't need their permission. Just as a reminder. What this particular document does is give the seller tools to push the primary contract out of the way in favor of the secondary contract or the backup / secondary contract. Okay, so let's jump in. Option to keep the house on the market, time clause. A, right to accept other offers. Buyer and seller agree that seller may continue to offer the property for sale and to accept any backup offer. Seller, in seller's sole discretion, may notify buyer in writing of an accepted backup offer. And B, buyer's right to remove condition. If seller does provide written notice to buyer, the buyer shall have X number of days after receipt of seller's written notice to provide written notice to seller of buyer's removal of the following conditions from the REPC. And so you would check due diligence, appraisal, and or financing condition as the conditions in which they need to remove. Okay. Now, these have a lot of consequences here, and I see quite often that people aren't thinking through this enough, because does it matter if our goal is to get the primary contract more committed with the time clause addendum, right, or to push contingencies out of the way in order to make us feel better about the situation? Does it matter if we remove the due diligence condition, but they still have a finance and appraisal condition? I think the practical effect of all that is it does not matter if those things are removed, because they can still cancel for any reason. It's their sole discretion to cancel. And so, on the other hand, if you are a buyer and you haven't even gotten your appraisal back, and you're progressing on a similar timeline as a regular transaction, does it feel very good that you're removing a contingency when you're progressing at a normal rate? It doesn't. It's kind of a hard balance to strike for people, I think. These things, I think, you really got to think through the scenarios with your seller and have a conversation about how that plays out before you select those boxes. Because if you select the bottom one, financing and, if applicable, subject to sale of buyer's property conditions, you're removing them both. But remember, too, let me back up. If we're using this, we should remove all contingency. This is just my personal opinion. There's all sorts of scenarios in which, removing one or two is appropriate, but not all. My personal opinion is that this document should be, we remove everything. And the reason for that is because if they're willing to remove everything, they have confidence that they're willing to move forward and that they actually have consequences, and that if they don't close, we get their earnest money. And people make very different decisions when they're faced with that. So if we face them with the prospect of, hey, if you don't respond to this in 3 days, then your earnest money is non-refundable now, they're going to have a real discussion amongst themselves about whether or not they want to proceed and what position they're currently in. So that's just my opinion. This should be a forceful document that is used to get people to make a serious decision. Feel free to have a different opinion. So paragraph C, additional earnest money. In addition to removing the above check condition, buyer agrees to deposit additional earnest money deposit in the amount of whatever. Buyer shall deposit the additional earnest money deposit into the same location, blah, 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 blah. A really great tool I don't see used enough. Because and by the way, the time to use paragraph C is the time of that you're most uncertain about which direction you should go, about whether or not you should accept a contract. Paragraph C is a powerful paragraph for you to use to make people make hard decisions. And just like paragraph B, where we're using that to make people sort of get out of the way of their am I in or am I out of this transaction? Paragraph C it just amplifies it all that much more. It's one thing to remove contingencies and be bound by a certain amount of money that your current earnest money deposit, but it's a whole nother factor to go, okay, I'm removing the contingency. I've already deposited $10,000, and now if I move forward, I got to write another check for $5,000. If they're willing to do that, we've got a deal. The chances that we are going to close are really, really high. So remember, it's okay to put pressure on people, and we should use these as leverage at all times. And then paragraph D, buyer's right to not remove conditions. If buyer does not remove from the Rep C the above check conditions within the time specified in section 1B of this addendum, then the Rep C will automatically become canceled, in which instance the earnest money deposit shall be released to buyer. Okay? So remember, sometime, and I may even done it in this video already, if the buyer is going to remove those contingencies and proceed forward, they need to provide written notice that they are doing that. If they let it lapse, if they don't respond to your notice of a backup offer, then they have effectively canceled it and they get their earnest money back. Okay. Anybody have any questions? Anybody have any questions on that before we move forward?
Yeah,
Does anybody have any? Does everybody? What is your comfort level with this situation? I feel like everybody is pretty comfortable negotiating with the time clause addendum and the subject to sale addendum. Is anybody feeling like our real estate community is also comfortable, uncomfortable, or they don't understand it? What say you?
Yeah, Mike, I'd just like to add that I was at a listing appointment this morning, and this all came up of...
Oh, hold on one second, Bob. I think I have, my computer has headset issues. One second. I don't know why it does this. Sorry, folks. All right, go ahead, Bob. Sorry, I fixed it.
Yeah, I was at a listing appointment this morning, and this whole scenario came up from the seller's side of how serious buyers are, and we had talked about requesting the buyer to put additional earnest money down, maybe some non-refundable stuff. But, the buyer's got to understand that this is kind of a two-way street, that the seller is selling this house and is moving someplace else, and they may not be able to buy anything else until they've really got their situation under control. And you could be causing the seller to go put money down on another house that they can't close on either until they get their home sold. And so there's a seriousness on both sides here that are being affected.
Yeah, I think there's so many dominoes that are connected with a single real estate transaction, and it's really hard to quantify all that at times. And earnest money solves all your problems to a large degree. And I agree with Bob that we should remind people at times it's an appropriate conversation to remind them that remind your seller that once you accept a contract, you have almost no power until the settlement deadline or until they propose new terms to the contract. Until then, you just have to sit back and wait. You can't really make any demands. You can't really do much. And so if people are willing to deposit large amounts of earnest money, that says a lot about it. And I've been in many situations where someone's unwillingness to deposit what we consider to be an appropriate amount of earnest money was very telling, because we had lengthy conversations about it. And the conversations were actually boiled down to, well, what do you care how much earnest money you're putting down? You intend to close, and it goes towards that, and it's a small part of your entire down payment for the loan anyway. Well, we don't want to risk it. Yeah, but you know what date in which you have to back out. So what's the major risk here? But the bottom line is that's pretty telling, that they don't have a lot of confidence, say, in their financing or their ability to conduct good due diligence or their intention to actually, I mean, I can't tell you how many transactions I've been a part of. And remember, I was in the commercial world where you get the real sense that somebody did all this, put it under contract, and then just like, oh, I'm busy. I can't really focus on due diligence, and I haven't talked to my bank yet, but I'll get there eventually. And, and you're kind of helpless in those situations. So vetting and earnest money go a really long way, really long way. Anybody else? Any more comments, suggestions, anything before we move on? Sounds good. Let's move on. All right. Last document. I don't think we've talked about this in a minute, but I think it's a really good reminder that this is out here and exists in the world. Contingent cancellation. This one has to be used with a teeny bit of care, but I do feel like there's plenty of scenarios in which our clients, we're in this scenario, we're going to pretend like we represent the buyer. Well, it's the only scenario in which we can pay. We represent the buyer, and there are terms in which we need accepted or we're not willing to move forward. Just use this form. I think it's the best way to move forward because, and listen, it's really simple. So we either get an extension of deadlines or we cancel for these reasons. And it's all nice and tidy and complete. And you can see that there's several scenarios in which you could use this. Okay. So let's just read it so we're clear. 1, extension of the deadline. Seller and buyer hereby agree to the following. A, where either due diligence deadline is extended to, or B, finance and appraisal deadline is extended to. So we're saying we either get an extension of these timelines or paragraph 2, notice of cancellation. If for any reason seller does not accept the terms of this addendum in its entirety by the applicable deadline provided below, this addendum shall act as buyer's written notice of cancellation of the REPSI pursuant to, and then you're going to either check A, due diligence condition, or B, financing condition. Be very careful. If you check the wrong box and you cancel for the due diligence condition and that timeline has already passed, you just lost your client's earnest money, is the bottom line. And then 3, the deadline to accept this addendum, the seller shall have until A, the last mutually accepted due diligence deadline, or B, the last mutually accepted financing and appraisal deadline. So that should really guide you there. If you check A, and then you checked B, financing appraisal, it still works, but remember, you got to check the notice of cancellation for the right term. I don't think you're going to be very confused about it, but just make sure you're checking the right boxes. It's a really good tool. I think it's pretty powerful, and also I think too, it prevents you from making any mistakes where you're going to submit an addendum, say the day before, right, for an extended deadline, and then the next day you've got to have already written and prepared a cancellation, and let's say you get distracted for an hour and a half with client phone calls and you don't submit the cancellation in time. That's what it prevents. It does help us in a way not mess up. Helps us. Does anybody have any questions? By the way, has anybody used this document any time in the past? Are we using it? Are we not even considering it? Is it a hassle? Is it effective? What say you? Huddle crowd, what say you? Boom, exactly. My thoughts exactly. All right, we're going to move on, and we're going to talk a little bit about Remy, and I want to show you a couple updates. Throw in the chat, give me your thoughts. Where are you at just personally with Remy? I don't care if you tell me what you like or there's a feature you want that's not there. Or are you using a feature that is really handy? If you would, give me some feedback. Feel free to unmute yourself. Because this is, we're in the early stages of this tool, and there has been a lot of improvement made since we first launched it. Where's everybody at? So we've got 17 people here. How many people, if you put in the chat, if you have or have not logged in and used Remy? Have you used Remy? Throw it in the chat there if you would, please. I want to get some sense. We got yes, I have. Bob says Joe had to do another fix for me this morning. All right, so we're using it though. Karen uses it and like it. Deanna many times. Okay, very good, very good. Yeah, I feel like we're just to give you guys perspective. We have, as a brokerage and as most of the people on the management team, we've been around long enough to see the launch of a lot of tools inside of brokerage. And the launches of new technology in brokerages are notoriously not exciting. And not because the brokerage wouldn't like the technology, because there's a lot of vetting that goes into bringing new technology into a brokerage. So, the people who bring it in are like, this is a good tool, our agents should use it. But the disappointment lies in, it's really hard to get your entire agent base to sort of pick it up and use it because habits are in place. You know your business. And now we're like, hey, this is something to improve your business. And like, well, I got to stop my business to go learn a new tool. Like, we know. But the adoption and use of this tool is so far outpaced anything I've ever seen. Like, it's been not universally adopted, but adopted at a rate of which we've never seen. Scott says, works best when there is an old MLS number I've discussed via email with Joe. Yeah, we've done some updates. It does actually work best with that. We've done an update to where you can do search by tax ID, and we can do, it'll pre-populate some fields with a tax ID, so you can start your search there. It's 1:46, so I'm going to only spend about 10 minutes as a reminder. If somebody would like a demo, would like me to show you a few things, I'm happy to do that too. And this isn't normal, typical Huddle stuff, but I feel like this is important enough that you're going to want to adopt it. So these changes that I'm going to show you were last weekend, I believe, that these were pushed through and updated. So to Scott's comment, yeah, we did have, when we first launched, we didn't even have the ability to really do an analysis on something that wasn't listed. We now have that ability. So you can see we have these 4 tiles here. I can count. I totally swear I can count. These 5 tiles here. It used to be we just had this, use this to get ideas on active MLS listings, but we now have the listing prep and CMA tile. So use this to prepare for a listing appointment or get a listing ready to go on the MLS. Build a valuation grade analysis for a property not yet on the MLS. So it's a subject property builder off MLS. We can do a manual input of the information, like if we have a tax, like if we have a tax sheet, we could do, and we have some specs on the house, we can do a manual entry there. And let me just show you this real quick too. So here's what it looks like, right? It'll show very similar input fields. you would type in like the address ideally, but this is just the title of what you're creating to save. So if you want to save it as the Andersons, you can do that, or the client name or the street address, whatever. And then of course, if it does work the best with an old MLS number, and of course, I think a lot of it's when we start when we're building out, an analysis anyway, an old MLS number goes so far. But let's say we don't have it. I know the by address, we could do a lookup by the address. We have improvements to make with this search by address. This one worked pretty well when I demoed it with my own home. It actually populated all this information here, which helped a lot. Okay, so you could do that to pre-populate all those, and of course double check everything. Remarks, if there is one of the things too that it did with old MLS numbers, it'll pre-populate the old MLS description. I don't actually know that that's meaningful to you. I think you should probably delete that and leave it blank and let Remy do some suggestion for you. This is a cool feature. This is your intended list price. So we would throw a price in there that we think we're going to list at right out the gate, and then we can let Remy analyze around that price, tell us what our strengths and weaknesses are. You can also check this box. I don't have a price yet. Recommend one for me. This report will use comparable sales as just pricing tiers and whatnot. I think if you use Remy, you kind of know what that's going to look like. And then we can do some comp filters to search for what we're looking for. So we can do a radius, how many months back, on market within, the last 3 months, active pending, and the type of, and then we could do advanced filters there too. And a lot of these filters you'll see we can really get refined with the filters there. Okay. So a lot of great updates there. And then we can jump right over to, anyway, that's your listing prep CMA. We can kind of build that and get some perspective there. And by the way, part of what I've been thinking about too is to demonstrate what I consider to be really the best use case of this is to create a listing presentation that is in stark contrast to what the rest of our industry is talking about. And what I mean by that is Remy can produce a level of analysis that no one else is producing when they talk about why we should list your property, the language that we should use in our property description, why that is now so much more important than it ever used to be. I don't even know I would guess that 90% of the agent population doesn't even understand how different the AI analysis of property searches has become, and what a stark contrast that is, and why your property descriptions mean more than they ever have. I don't think the vast majority of our industry even understands that. So to slide those comments in, not like, hey, no one understands this, but slide in, hey, this is what I think your property description should look like, and this is why I think it should look like that. Just that conversation alone, no one else is even having that conversation because they're not even aware of it. Linda says it's so much faster than doing an old school. So true. And a lot of what we say about Remy is that you could come to a lot of the conclusions on your own if you had a ton of time. But not only does Remy do it faster, I think there's some stuff in here that we can't come to the conclusions on our own, especially when it comes to relevant search terms, what people are looking for in real time, how to make real great adjustments to our descriptions. All those things I think are actually kind of a new frontier in a large degree. All right, let's move on. Competitive listing analysis. Good. Thank you, Bob. It will even give you an order of photos. Yeah, another great addition to that. And that's part of the update too. It's going to pull in, if you do have an old MLS, it's pulling in some of those old photos so you can get some perspective on that too. The competitive listing analysis has also been updated. One of the complaints in the past, and because we don't have a lot of time, but one of the complaints of the past is when you would select or deselect comps, it would do that whole big analysis. And there's no really way to bypass that big analysis. We just got to wait for it. But now when you select or deselect comps, you have the option. It doesn't do anything until you tell it to refresh, which is a really great addition to what's going on. Hey, by the way, the neighborhood report, I really want to start pushing people to use this as part of a lot of things. You could do this as, in my opinion, it would be a really good pre-listing piece to send to somebody, okay? And you know, you could just send a link, and when you share those links, you can select and deselect the stuff you want to send them. But it's a really good analysis to sort of prep somebody for what's going on in their neighborhood. I think it's an amazing tool for that. I also think the same can be said for your buyers, especially people coming in from out of state or out of town, to say, hey, you know, they're coming in and they go, hey, I picked this community because I saw a couple YouTube videos or I read an article, but I don't really know about it. I mean, just to go in here and give them a massive amount of information in a short period of time is an amazing use of the neighborhood report. It can really prep people to show you what's going on. So yeah, there's that. By the way, if you just have general questions, there we go. Area chat. So if you just like, hey, just want to have a discussion, look, you can just come in here. You don't have to go through the whole rigmarole. You can just have a conversation about, I just want to do something with this listing. Is this a good idea? You can come in there, enter your MLS ID, put in an address, and have what you're used to having a conversation with a regular old AI chatbot. But in this instance, the chat, the parameters, the walls that we put around it are for the sources that we say it has to rely upon, which are not just regular sources, right? We're actually connected to databases that make our searches and our questions more relevant, okay? So if you do want to come and do this and just ask general questions, I'd encourage you to come to Area instead of just using ChatGPT, because the Area is going to give us a much more refined and much more specific response that is tailored towards what people are actually searching for in their real estate searches, as well as what our competition's doing, which those, you know, the general Geminis and ChatGPTs and stuff aren't doing. So I think it's actually more important. You can come over here and do SEO keyword searches, right? So we type in the property address and we can do SEO and keyword searches. Those are, and see what search trends are. That's pretty high level. I don't know that we necessarily need to do that all the time, but it's there for you. Let's go back to the dashboard. I want to show you something that's pretty cool. This is, if you're wondering about your digital presence, we created a digital presence audit tool, which I think is really great. Like, just go and put your name in there and just follow its prompts, and it'll tell you how to make your digital presence better. And I can't tell you how many times that I want to interact with an agent outside the company, and I'm like, all right, I'll go find their phone number, and I can't find it anywhere. Like, what is going on? You are in business. I know that if you put your phone number out there, you get a whole bunch of spam calls. But you know what you also get? Calls from people who want to do business. Like, it sucks. We're in a horrible place with that. But the bottom line is your digital presence is very meaningful now more than ever, and it's only going to get more meaningful as time goes on. So it'll make really good, easy to make adjustments on your digital presence. So really great tool. Does anybody have any questions, comments, suggestions on this stuff and the updates from Remy? All right. Well, it's 1:57, a really great time to wrap it up. And I hope everybody watched that match last night. It was exciting. Scott, yes, I actually got an email from Joe. He said he knows that you're looking for him, and he has set aside time tomorrow to upload all of those, so you should see him on YouTube very soon. I couldn't agree more, Bob. By the way, if you're not into the World Cup, now is the time. Team USA has never had a team like this in a very long time. It's now's the time to jump on the bandwagon. I know why you haven't in the past. Like, it makes sense. Even if you don't understand the sport, they're an exciting team. They're getting rough out there. There's some contact. There's some controversy. They're pushing. They're shoving. They're running fast. Bandwagon time. Have a great weekend. Have a great 4th. We'll catch you on the flip side.